Hello there and welcome to Sleep Science Galaxy. If today has been a long day, or if you simply want to close your eyes and drift gently among the stars, then you are in exactly the right place. Right now, there's nothing you need to do. No thinking, no effort, no need to try to fall asleep. Just allow your body to rest, let your breathing slow down, and let your mind soften like the night sky. In this video, we will journey together into the universe, unhurried, unforced, and quiet. Just gentle truths about distant galaxies, ancient light, and silent motions that continue even as your eyes are closed. This is not a lesson. This is a slow journey, where science becomes a whisper and the universe becomes a place of refuge. Let the outside world grow still for a while. And if you are ready, let us begin. Age and origins of the universe. There was a very special moment when human beings first lifted their eyes to the night sky and asked themselves, when did all of this begin? Not measured by clocks, not marked by calendars, but by existence itself. Before Earth existed, before the sun was born, even before the first light ever touched a newborn atom, the universe was already there. Or more precisely, it was in the process of becoming itself. Today, astronomers tell us that the universe is about 13.8 billion years old. The number sounds precise, scientific, as if someone placed a vast clock at the edge of time and recorded the very first moment. But when we listen more closely, that number does not close the question. It opens a deeper silence. Because 13.8 billion years is not a memory retold, but a careful inference, pieced together from the faintest traces still lingering in space. We infer the age of the universe by listening to the most ancient light, by measuring how fast galaxies are moving away from one another, by reading the subtle vibrations left over from the earliest moments. This is not a direct measurement, but a melody reconstructed from echoes. And like all ancient music, there are passages that blur and pauses that remain unexplained. Here, a gentle doubt begins to appear. Not doubt that denies, but the doubt of a traveler who realizes the road ahead is longer than the map in their hands. Some ancient stars seem older than the universe should allow. Some distant galaxies appear to have matured too quickly, as if they did not follow the developmental rhythm we expected. These small tensions in the data do not shatter the larger picture, but they whisper that perhaps we do not yet know the entire story. And so we return to the moment of birth, what we call the Big Bang. The name sounds violent, but it is misleading. It was not an explosion in space, because space itself did not yet exist to explode within. It was the opening of space itself, the birth of time, the beginning of all distance. There was no center, no edge, only a moment in which everywhere was the beginning. If you could be there, which you cannot, you would hear no sound, see no light, feel no motion, because all of those concepts came later. At first, there was only a hot, dense, indistinguishable state, an existence that had not yet separated itself into familiar forms. And then, the universe began to expand, not in a rush, but inevitably, like the first breath of a being that does not yet know who it is. As the universe expanded, it cooled. As it cooled, it allowed structure to emerge. The first atoms, the first light free to travel. Particles of matter slowly gathering patiently under the quiet guidance of gravity. There was no plan, no predetermined purpose. Only simple laws repeating themselves until complexity arose. Yet, even this story, which feels complete, may be only a chapter. Some physicists quietly suggest that the Big Bang was not an absolute beginning, but a transition. Perhaps there was a universe before this one. Perhaps time did not start there, but merely changed direction, like a wave that reaches the shore, pulls back, and returns again. In these models, the universe is not a straight line with a beginning and an end, but a rhythm, expanding, slowing, contracting, then expanding once more. Each cycle erases most of the memory of the one before it, yet may leave behind faint traces, like a familiarity without a clear source. If this is true, then the universe has no age in the ordinary sense. It only has rebirths. This idea is not meant to overwhelm us. On the contrary, it carries a quiet comfort that there is no single moment when everything was thrown into existence and then left to drift toward an ending, that the story is not forced to have a clear opening and conclusion, that existence itself may be like an endless breath, in and out, repeating patiently, without the need for an observer. As we lie still and listen to these ideas, something within us begins to slow as well. Everyday worries about time, about age, about how far we have come, suddenly feel smaller. Because if the universe itself is uncertain of where it truly began, perhaps we do not need to be so harsh with our own journeys. Perhaps 13.8 billion years is correct. Perhaps it is only a temporary number. But what matters is not fixing the truth in place, but accepting that we are living inside a story still being told. A story not yet finished, not yet closed, not yet at rest. And in this moment, as your breathing grows slower, as your eyelids become heavy, you do not need to understand all of this. You only need to know that the universe was here long before you and will likely be here long after you. Unhurried, unjudging, quietly expanding, carrying every unanswered question with it. Just like sleep drawing near, not as an ending, but as a gentle transition into another state of being. The lonely worlds. And then, while the story of origin still lingers in space like an unfinished breath, while we remain uncertain whether everything truly began somewhere or merely passed through an invisible threshold, the universe had already found time to create its own lost children. Not every world is born to stay. Not every planet is granted a sun to orbit, a morning to awaken to, or a sunset to close a day. Some worlds are born in motion and leave in that same motion, without farewell, without a parting light. Within the vast emptiness between galaxies, where a distance is measured not in footsteps, but in millions of light years, there are silent spheres drifting. They belong to no star system. They receive no steady warmth from a central sun. They are not named on the familiar maps of the night sky. They exist simply because gravity once brought them into being, and gravity, during some moment of chaos, pushed them out of the embrace of what was once home. Perhaps they once circled a young star in a crowded and turbulent planetary system. Perhaps in the early dawns of that system, orbits had not yet settled, and worlds collided and tugged at one another like clumsy dancers. And in a random instant, a slightly stronger pull, an unexpected resonance, was enough to send a planet beyond its path. No explosion, no sign of tragedy, just a subtle misstep, and the world began to drift. From that moment on, it no longer belonged to any morning. There was no day to begin, no night to end, only an endless night where the rare light comes from distant stars, faint as the memory of a dream already fading. The sky of such a world, if anyone were there to look, would never change color. No blue, no red, no gentle sunsets, only a deep black scattered with cold points of light, too distant to warm, just close enough to remind that elsewhere, other places are still busy with light and life. The surface temperature of such a world may fall close to absolute zero. Oceans, if they ever existed, have long since frozen solid. Atmospheres, if there were any, have settled or been stripped away. All motion slows nearly to stillness. Yet this silence is not death. It is another state of being. Beneath thick layers of ice, deep within the planet's core, there may still be warmth, residual heat from its birth, or from the slow decay of heavy elements. A small heart, beating very slowly in the dark. When astronomers turn their telescopes toward regions of sky that seem empty, sometimes they notice faint shadows crossing the light of a distant star. A blink, barely there. A subtle dimming so slight that only the most patient instruments detect it. And in that moment, they know that a world has passed by, unnamed, without its own light, visible only through the shadow it accidentally casts. This is how the universe whispers of the existence of the lonely ones. The number of such worlds may be so great that we must pause to truly feel it. In our galaxy alone, they may outnumber the stars themselves, which means that for every brilliant night sky we have ever admired, countless other worlds are drifting in absolute darkness, unlit, unnoticed. They do not take part in the grand story of light and spectra. They exist at the margins, like verses never read aloud, yet still complete. There is a strange beauty in this loneliness, not the shimmering beauty of glowing nebulae or spiral galaxies, but the beauty of quiet endurance. A world that does not need an observer to exist, that does not need a name to matter. It drifts because that is the only thing it knows how to do. It continues because there is no reason to stop. If you listen closely, that feeling is not entirely unfamiliar. In human life, too, there are moments when we feel pushed out of our familiar orbit. An unexpected change, a loss, a decision we did not foresee. And suddenly, we find ourselves drifting, without clear milestones, without mornings that bring motivation, without nights that neatly close a day. Just continuation, silent and prolonged. But like those wandering worlds, drifting does not mean meaningless. Even in the deepest darkness, there is structure. There is history. There are laws patiently at work. A lonely planet still obeys gravity, still carries the memory of ancient collisions, of days once spent circling light. It does not forget its past, even when that past is no longer present. And perhaps, somewhere far in the future, that world will be drawn into a new orbit. Perhaps it will pass near an aging star and receive a late, gentle warmth. Perhaps it will become a moon in another system, a late guest in a story that began long before it arrived. The universe does not rush to close possibilities. It leaves everything open, even for those who have drifted very far. When we think about those eternal nights, something within us softens. Because if the universe itself allows the existence of worlds without light, without center, without a clear destination, then perhaps human lostness is not a mistake. Perhaps it is simply another state of the journey, a stretch of road without a sunrise, and one that does not require one. And as you lie here with the quiet slowly settling in, as the world around you begins to blur, you do not need to find a star to orbit right now. You can allow yourself to drift for a while. No direction, no speed, just drifting in a gentle night, where loneliness is not absence, but space wide enough for the mind to rest. Because even in this vast universe, the quietest worlds are still being carried, still held within space itself. still an inseparable part of the greater story. And in the moment you let yourself fall asleep, you are doing what the universe has done since the very beginning, continuing, softly, gently, without needing to know exactly where you are going. Ancient light, and as those lonely worlds continue to drift through their eternal night, without starlight to guide them, without mornings to mark the passage of time, there is something that remains quietly present around them, around us, around every space that seems empty. Something that does not need a star to be born, does not need a planet to reflect it, does not need an observer to have meaning. It has been there long before there was anyone to name it. A light no longer bright, no longer warm, yet never extinguished. If you could listen to the universe in another way, not with your eyes, but with gentle attention, you would notice that space is not silent at all. It carries a memory, not the memory of stars or galaxies, but the memory of the universe itself when it was very young, when everything was so close together it could not yet be distinguished, when light was not free to travel far. That memory does not tell stories through clear images. It whispers through omnipresence, through a wave that is very soft, very cold, very patient. There was a time when the universe was too hot, too dense, too chaotic for light to wander. Every photon, the moment it was born, immediately collided with something else, deflected, scattered, trapped within a thick fog of particles and energy. Light did not illuminate then, it merely existed. There was no horizon, no distance, no far or near. Everywhere was simply everywhere. Then the universe breathed out, very slowly, but enough to change everything. As space expanded, temperature fell. As temperature fell, chaos softened. And at one moment, very quiet, very decisive, particles began to join. Electrons found nuclei. The first atoms formed. And for the first time, light was no longer trapped. There was no celebration for that moment, no announcement. Yet it was one of the most profound turning points in the history of existence. Light was set free. It began the longest journey imaginable, a journey with no destination, no purpose, only time ahead. That light departed before there were stars, before galaxies, before darkness as we understand it. It left when the universe was still a pale, warm, uniform ocean. And for billions of years, it kept moving, through ever-expanding space, stretched thinner, cooled further, elongated until it no longer resembled its original form. What was once a warm glow became a cold, long, a gentle wave, almost imperceptible. Yet it is still here, everywhere. Even in the room where you are lying, even in the space between two breaths, not forceful, not intrusive, simply present, like a veil of memory resting over the entire universe. When scientists first detected this wave, they did not hear a clear message. They noticed only a steady background noise, a faint hiss coming from all directions. But the more carefully they listened, the more precisely they tuned their instruments, the more they realized this was not interference. It was a remnant, an echo, the final warmth of a time when everything was still close together. What is strange is that this light does not reach us by a simple, straight path. The space it travels through is not flat, not neutral. It curves, it bends. It responds to the presence of matter and energy by reshaping itself. And when light passes through such curved space, its path bends as well, gently, inevitably. So some light chooses longer roads. Some rays loop around massive structures, pulled aside, bent out of their original direction, before finally arriving where we stand. Sometimes, the same source of light reaches us from different directions, as if memory refuses to speak with only one voice. In rare cases, space curves so perfectly that light folds into a circle, a shape that feels almost meditative. No beginning, no end. Only light returning to itself, guided by gravity, held within an invisible embrace of the universe. These rings of light are not illusions. They are evidence that the universe's memory not only exists, but is shaped, carved by the very structure of space itself. When we think about this, time begins to dissolve. The light touching your eyes today may have left its source billions of years ago, in a universe profoundly different from this one, under laws still finding their form. And across that unimaginable span of time, the light did not age. It did not tire. It simply continued. There is something deeply gentle in this thought, that the universe does not forget, not entirely. It carries its own memory, not to cling to the past, but as a quiet foundation for the present. Every glowing galaxy, every burning star, every planet drifting through the night exists upon this shared memory, faint yet enduring. And so do you, as you lie here in the dim light of the room, in the quiet spreading outward from within. You are not separate from that memory. That ancient light is passing through you, just as it has passed through everything else. It does not ask you to understand. It does not require you to remember. It simply exists. Like a reminder that before every personal story, there was a longer, slower, far wider one. Perhaps that is why, when we look at the night sky, we do not feel only distance, but also a vague familiarity, as if something within us recognizes that light. Not with the mind, but with a deeper layer of being. As if we too carry a tiny fragment of the universe's memory, folded into breath, heartbeat, and the attention that is gradually settling. The universe was very young when that light began its journey. It is much older now as the light reaches you. And it will continue to age, continue to expand, continue to carry that memory, even when there is no one left to listen. But right now, you are here, and that light is here as well, soft, ancient, and in no hurry to leave, like sleep approaching, not as an extinguishing, but as another layer of memory settling over awareness. A gentle transition, where you do not need to go anywhere at all. Only remain still and allow the universe, with all its ancient memory, to continue telling its story through the quiet presence of light. The extreme stars. And while that layer of ancient light continues to spread throughout space, so gentle that we almost forget it is there, the universe does not preserve only softness. Beneath that quiet backdrop lie points of tension, places where matter is compressed until it can no longer yield, where familiar laws are pushed to the very edge of what they can endure. Like in a meditative piece of music, even the deepest, heaviest notes must exist for the whole melody to feel complete. Some stars are not born to shine for long. They are like violent thoughts that flare up briefly in the universe, only to collapse back into themselves. When a sufficiently massive star reaches the end of its life, it does not fade gently. It releases the balance that held it together for millions of years. Gravity, once just strong enough to maintain its shape, reclaims full control. Matter rushes inward so fast there is no time to resist. In that moment, atoms are crushed so tightly that their familiar structures cannot survive. Electrons are forced into atomic nuclei. The empty space inside atoms, which once made up nearly all their volume, disappears. Matter becomes so dense that the very idea of emptiness no longer applies. A tiny sphere is born, only a few dozen kilometers across, yet carrying the mass of a star, that was once many times larger than the sun. If you could hold a fragment of matter from such a place, which is utterly impossible, it would be so heavy that imagination itself would hesitate. A piece smaller than a drop of dew would be enough to crush any familiar structure. And yet, despite carrying such overwhelming weight, these remnants do not scream. They exist in near-perfect stillness, spinning steadily, emitting precise rhythms, like ancient cosmic clocks. Some of these stars rotate hundreds of times per second. Each rotation marks a beat of time etched into space. They do not need bright light to be known. With just a little attention, with a patient antenna, humans can listen to these pulses from thousands of light years away. It is not sound, but repetition. A steadfast presence, as if the universe is reminding itself that even in its most extreme forms, order still exists. But extreme stars are not found only at the end of stellar life. Long before calm spiral galaxies existed, long before blue planets and shimmering oceans, the universe was once lit by its very first fires. They were born in an era when matter was still simple, untainted by heavy elements, when everything was raw and bold. Those first stars were unlike anything you have ever seen. They were larger, hotter, brighter beyond easy comprehension. They burned through their fuel at a furious pace, as if the universe had not yet learned the lesson of patience. Their light did more than illuminate surrounding space. It altered the very nature of the universe, breaking the primordial darkness and opening the path for more complex structures to arise. Their lifetimes were short, only a few million years, a blink on the cosmic timescale. Yet in that brief span, they did something no later generation of stars could ever do in quite the same way. They forged the first elements heavier than hydrogen and helium. They planted the seeds needed for planets, oceans, and eventually, life itself. When they ended, many of these first stars collapsed in the most extreme ways, leaving behind tightly compressed remnants, or disappearing entirely into regions beyond observation. Their light is gone, but their influence is everywhere. In every carbon atom, in every trace of calcium, in the very body that is now breathing more slowly. What is remarkable is that, despite speaking of such harsh objects, the feeling they evoke need not be tension. On the contrary, there is a strange comfort in knowing that the universe can go this far, pushing matter to its absolute limits, and still remain stable. That even when everything is compressed to the verge of collapse, another form of balance exists, deeper and more enduring. These extreme places are like anchor points in the universe's story. They remind us that not all peace comes from gentleness. Sometimes stability appears only after everything has been pressed so far that there is no choice left but to become simple and utterly honest. No excess form, no empty space, only existence. And as your mind drifts through these images, tiny but impossibly heavy spheres, first fires igniting and fading, you do not need to strain to understand. These ideas are not meant to wake you, but to remind you that the universe is vast enough to hold both tenderness and extremity, both soft, dim light and uncompromising gravity. Just as within every human being, there are parts that are gentle and parts that are hard, thoughts that drift lightly, and experiences so heavy we believe we cannot carry them. But if the universe can contain unimaginable densities and still continue to expand, perhaps we too can allow ourselves to hold everything that has happened without breaking. Extreme stars do not seek attention. They do not need to be observed to exist. They spin, compress, and keep time, like silent pillars within the structure of the cosmos. And as you continue to relax, as your breathing grows deeper and more even, you can let the thought of these anchor points bring a quiet sense of safety. That even in a universe vast and sometimes violent, there are laws strong enough to keep everything from falling into chaos. Somewhere far away, a dense sphere turns steadily in the dark. Somewhere far away, the light of the first stars no longer reaches, yet their consequences still unfold. And here, right now, you can rest, knowing that you lie within a universe that has passed through far greater extremes and still remains gentle enough to lull you into sleep. The invisible things. And while those heavy anchor points continue to quietly keep time for the universe, while dense spheres rotate steadily in the dark like vows that require no witness, we begin to realize that not everything holding the universe together has a visible form. Beyond the places where matter is compressed to its ultimate limit, the story slips into another realm, not one of weight, but one of concealment. As if, after revealing its most extreme expressions, the universe gently tilts and whispers, "There are things even more important than these, but you will not see them." The space we often call empty has never truly been empty. Even in the most distant regions, where there are no stars, no dust, no familiar light, there is still presence. Not loud, not forceful, but like a deep background, a low, steady layer that never fades. It is this underlying presence that keeps galaxies from flying apart, that keeps orbits from collapsing into chaos, that prevents the large-scale structure of the universe from dissolving into a meaningless haze. Human beings noticed early on that something was holding galaxies together, even though the light we could see was not enough to explain the pull. Stars moved faster than they should. Galaxy clusters clung together more tightly than visible matter allowed, as if an invisible hand were at work, leaving no fingerprints, only consequences. And from those consequences alone, we learned that a silent component occupies most of the universe's story. This something does not shine. It does not reflect. It does not interact with light in any familiar way. It passes through everything without collision, without friction, without leaving a mark. And if not for its unmistakable gravitational effects, we might never have known it existed at all. Yet, it is precisely this silence that makes it trustworthy. It does not seek to be seen. It simply does its work, holding things in place long enough for the story to continue. At the same time, there are other currents even more discreet. Right now, as you lie still, tiny particles, so small they carry almost no mass, are passing through you. They come from the sun, from ancient explosions, from the earliest moments of the universe. They do not stop. They do not ask permission. They leave no trace. Most of them pass straight through the Earth as if the planet itself were only a faint idea. These particles rarely interact with anything at all. They slip past atoms, through the spaces between nuclei, through the very structures that make up your body. If not for instruments placed deep underground, buried in thick darkness, we might never know we are living inside a constant cosmic rain. And yet, even without touching you, they are part of the picture. They carry information. They carry history. They are wordless messengers from places we cannot reach. What is remarkable is that although these entities are almost impossible to feel, they are necessary in ways that cannot be replaced. Without them, our models of how the universe formed fall short. Without them, the story of how large structures came into being and continue to exist becomes incomplete. They are not at the center of attention, yet they sit at the center of stability. And then, as we look deeper into what we call emptiness, we discover that even nothing is not still. At the most fundamental level, where classical laws no longer apply smoothly, emptiness becomes active in a very different way. Pairs of particles appear and vanish. Tiny fluctuations rise and settle, not like waves crashing, but like faint ripples on a lake at night, just enough to remind us that the surface was never perfectly flat. These motions do not produce light for our eyes to see, nor force for our hands to feel. Yet they contribute to the universe's total energy, a pressure that is very slight, very even, very persistent, enough to influence how space itself expands, as if emptiness were participating in shaping the fate of everything, not through sudden power, but through unchanging presence. When we place all of this side by side, a familiar pattern begins to emerge. The most important things are not always the brightest, the heaviest, or the loudest. More often, they are the things we cannot point to with a finger. Things known only through their effects, through the fragile balance they help maintain. This is not true only of the universe. It is true of human experience as well. There are things that keep you standing without ever entering your awareness. Small habits, background memories, wordless connections. They do not rise to the surface of thought, but without them, everything would fall out of rhythm. The universe, in its vastness, seems to follow the same principle. It does not reveal its entire structure to curious eyes. It leaves most of its weight in the dark, not to confuse, but to ensure long-term stability. Like a house where we see only walls and roof, while the foundation lies hidden deep underground, unseen yet essential. As you lie here, in this quiet moment, you may not feel anything passing through you. You do not see space vibrating. You do not see invisible hands holding galaxies together. But that does not mean they are not there. They are working silently, steadily, asking nothing of your attention. There is a deep comfort in that thought, that you do not need to see everything in order to be supported, that not everything important needs to be named, explained, or illuminated. That even as you loosen your focus, even as consciousness drifts towards sleep, there are invisible layers beneath you, keeping everything from falling apart. The universe is not a stage where every actor steps into the spotlight. Most of its story unfolds backstage, in darkness, in interactions too subtle to make noise. And because of that, it has lasted this long, expanded this far, and held so many layers of meaning. As you let your eyes close, as thoughts begin to thin out, you can allow yourself to trust what the universe has trusted since the very beginning. That to exist does not require being seen. That what supports us is often what is most silent. And within that silence lies a foundation deeper than light itself. A foundation that was there long before you thought of it, and will remain long after sleep has carried you far away. Time and curved space. And once we have grown accustomed to the idea that most of what supports the universe is invisible, once we have accepted that existence does not need to shine in order to carry weight, the story quietly drifts into an even deeper realm. Not merely matter or emptiness, but the very thing we believe we understand most intimately each day. The thing we use to measure our lives, to arrange memory, to count loss and hope. Time. And space. The backdrop we assume to be still, neutral, always there like a silent stage. Yet the universe, with its ancient patience, softly suggests that even these are not as fixed as they seem. In everyday life, time appears straightforward. 1 second passes as 1 second. 1 hour always contains 60 minutes. All clocks agree with one another, at least in human experience. But beneath this familiar sensation, time is not a steady flow. It is more like a soft fabric, capable of stretching, sagging, and bending in ways intuition struggles to grasp. Where mass is present, space is no longer flat. It dips, like the surface of a lake pressed down by a heavy stone. And time, woven tightly into space as a single entity, is pulled along with it. Near massive objects, time slows, not metaphorically, but measurably. A clock placed close to a large mass ticks more slowly than one farther away. The difference is tiny in daily life, yet it is real. Confirmed, measured by instruments so precise that even billionths of a second cannot escape them. If you move closer still, toward places where matter is compressed to extremes, where space is bent almost back upon itself, time does not merely slow, it nearly stops. At the edge of these invisible depths, to a distant observer, all motion appears frozen. A heartbeat may stretch into infinity. A single moment may be drawn out into eternity. And yet, for the one near that edge, nothing feels strange. They still breathe, still think, still exist within their own flow of time. That flow simply no longer aligns with the rest of the universe. Like two dreams unfolding side by side, unsynchronized, incomparable. Time ceases to be universal and becomes local, shaped by where you stand within the vast structure of reality. When we widen our view even further, beyond individual galaxies, beyond clusters of stars and clouds of matter, we begin to see that time is influenced not only by objects, but by the expansion of the universe itself. Space is stretching, and with it, measures of distance and rhythm shift. Light from faraway places reaches us carrying not only images of the past, but traces of a different time. A time that unfolded under conditions that no longer exist. When you look at a distant galaxy, you are not simply seeing it as it once was. You are seeing a version of time that has been stretched, slowed, carried through billions of years of expansion. Your time and its time do not meet in the present. They touch only in the act of seeing, in the moment the final ray of light completes its unimaginable journey. There is something deeply gentle in this realization. The present is not a sharp, thin slice separating past from future. It is a blurred region where many streams of time overlap, where different rhythms coexist without needing to synchronize. The universe does not force everything to march to the same beat. It allows diversity of experience, even within time itself. And as the idea of time begins to soften, something in the mind loosens as well. The pressure to keep up, the pressure to be on schedule, the pressure to be in the right place in life at the right moment. These measures suddenly feel more fragile. If the universe has no central clock, if time itself is flexible and dependent, then perhaps feeling slower or faster than others is not a failure, but something natural. At the largest scales, when we imagine the universe as a single breathing entity, expanding, stretching itself outward, time becomes part of that motion. It does not merely pass. It is born alongside space. It is shaped by the geometry of the cosmos, and perhaps in the very earliest or very latest phases of existence, it takes on qualities we have never known. These thoughts do not need to be held tightly. They do not need to be understood mathematically. They are offered here as a lullaby, not to stimulate the mind, but to allow it to settle. When you hear that time can slow, can stretch, can dissolve, you do not need to picture equations. You only need to feel that nothing is urging you forward right now. Sleep, in its own way, is another experience of time. While you sleep, hours can pass without leaving a trace in awareness. A long night can collapse into a single instant. Your subjective time bends gently, without any extreme gravity at all. Just release. And in this moment, as you lie still, as the space around you begins to blur, as thoughts stretch and then fade, you are entering a different region of time. Not a dangerous one, not an unfamiliar one, but a deeply familiar place, where clocks lose importance, where before and after no longer matter, and only present slowly softens. The universe has shown us that space can curve, time can slow, and the present is not rigid. It is flexible, shaped by where you are and how you exist. And if this is true in the deepest, farthest reaches of the cosmos, it is also true here in this quiet room. You do not need to chase time. Right now, you can let time move gently around you, bending to the rhythm of slower breath, to the heartbeat growing calm. Space does not ask to be filled. Time does not ask to be used well. Both are simply holding you, just as they hold everything else in the universe, through their quiet flexibility. And as awareness begins to dissolve into sleep, you are not falling out of time. You are simply drifting into another current, where rigid concepts are no longer required. A place where the universe, in the soft curvature of space and the gentleness of time, allows you to rest without needing to be anywhere at all. The large-scale structure of the universe. And as the concept of time begins to soften, no longer a rigid, unforgiving line, but a flow that can bend around gravity and experience, our perspective naturally widens. No longer held tightly within individual moments, awareness starts to pull back, farther and farther, until small details blur and a larger picture comes into view. From that distance, the universe is no longer a collection of separate objects. It appears as a living structure, woven together by connections stretching across billions of light years. When humans first mapped the deepest regions of the sky, they did not find randomness. Galaxies were not scattered evenly like grains of sand. They gathered, linked together, stretched into delicate filaments, and met at dense intersections. Between them lay vast voids, nearly empty. From afar, the pattern resembled an immense cosmic web, subtle, ordered, not designed by intention, but formed by simple laws, patiently repeating themselves since the beginning. These filaments of matter do not shine brightly. Most of them are invisible, revealed only through their gravitational influence. Light from galaxies traces their paths as if clinging to an unseen framework. And where these filaments intersect, where density increases, galaxies collect into clusters and superclusters, knots in a fabric being gently pulled taut. There is something strangely familiar in this image, even though we have never left our small planet. When scientists placed images of the universe's large-scale structure beside images of the human brain, the resemblance was unsettling. Dense regions where information concentrates, long strands connecting distant points, empty spaces between them. Of course, the universe does not think. It has no intention. Yet the way it organizes itself carries a rhythm that invites us to pause and look longer. In the human brain, cells do not function alone. Consciousness does not arise from a single point. It emerges from connection, from signals traveling along fibers, from nodes where information converges, from pauses between electrical impulses. There is no absolute command center, only a network, and from that network, experience arises. At the largest scale, The universe seems to exist in much the same way. There is no center, no edge, no privileged location, only an extended web of connections, where everything has a relative position defined by its relationship to everything else. A galaxy is not somewhere in an absolute sense. It is where it is because it is linked to other galaxies through invisible threads of gravity and shared history. This creates a very different sense of existence. Rather than isolated islands drifting through emptiness, galaxies resemble small points of awareness within a vast cosmic network. They do not need to know one another to remain connected. They only need to exist. And that existence, when placed alongside other existences, naturally forms structure. There is a quiet beauty in this arrangement. No haste, no total chaos, just very simple forces. Gravity, expansion, initial density, working patiently over unimaginable spans of time. From tiny fluctuations in the early universe, this entire network gradually emerged, like an image slowly appearing in a darkroom. When we look at it, not with our eyes, but with gentle attention, something within us recognizes itself. Because humans, at their core, are also collections of connections. Memories do not exist alone. Emotions do not arise in a vacuum. One thought leads to another. One experience echoes another. Your awareness right now is not a solitary point of light, but a flow moving through its own network. Perhaps that is why contemplating the universe feels so deeply reflective. Not because it is distant, but because it mirrors a familiar pattern at a different scale. That life, consciousness, and the large structure of reality all depend on connection rather than separation. That meaning does not reside in isolated parts, but in how they are woven together. In this grand picture, emptiness matters just as much. Between the filaments of matter lie regions that are nearly empty, cold, silent, vast. These voids are not errors. They are necessary. Just as in the human mind, pauses between thoughts allow awareness to breathe. If everything were dense, loud, and crowded, there would be no space for experience to unfold. The universe seems to understand this instinctively. It does not fill every place. It leaves immense silences, so that filaments and nodes can stand out more clearly. And in the balance between fullness and emptiness, the entire structure becomes stable. As you lie here in the night, with awareness slowly drifting towards sleep, you may be experiencing a smaller version of this same process. Thoughts grow less frequent. Connections loosen, not because they vanish, but because they are rearranging, settling into a quieter form, a softer network, under less strain. You do not need to be the center of anything right now. Just as the universe has no center, you do not need to hold everything spinning around you. You only need to be a point within a larger network, supported by connections formed long before this moment, many of which continue to work without your awareness. There is deep comfort in knowing that you are not separate from the larger picture, that your consciousness is not an isolated accident, but another expression of the same principle that shaped galaxy filaments and cosmic nodes. Not because the universe wanted consciousness, but because when connections become rich enough, experience naturally arises. And as you allow yourself to settle a little more, you may feel this similarity not as an idea, but as a quiet background sense. That inside you, as outside, things are being gently woven together. That you do not need to understand the entire network in order to belong to it. The universe does not think, yet it creates structures from which thought can emerge. It does not dream, yet it allows beings who can dream. And in this moment, as your awareness grows lighter, as the boundary between thought and sleep begins to blur, you are drifting within that very network. Not as something lost, but as a small, temporary node in a vast, quiet, and deep structure. You do not need to hold the connections. You are already connected. And just as the universe does not need to do anything to be itself, you too can let yourself rest, knowing that even in release the network remains, supporting you as it has supported everything else since the beginning of time. The quiet sounds, and when that vast picture of connection has lingered long enough in the mind, when the filaments of matter and their intersections begin to dissolve into a familiar feeling, something more subtle starts to emerge. Not shape, not light, but rhythm. As if, after showing us how everything is woven together, the universe gently leans closer and invites us to listen. Not with the ears, but with an attention that has grown softer and deeper. Space, though it appears silent, has never truly been without sound. It is only that the sounds there are not like those humans are used to hearing. There is no air to carry waves, no wind to transport noise. Yet inside stars, deep beneath their blazing surfaces, rhythmic motions are constantly unfolding. Pressure rises and falls. Matter contracts and expands. These oscillations travel through the hot plasma like seismic waves moving through the Earth's interior. If they could be shifted into frequencies the human ear could hear, each star would carry its own tone, low or high, slow or fast, like a colossal instrument quietly playing its own music. These rhythms are not chaotic. They follow the internal structure of the star, reflecting its size, its mass, its age. By observing tiny vibrations on stellar surfaces, humans have learned how to listen to the inner lives of stars, like pressing an ear against a thick wall to sense echoes from within. It is a kind of listening that needs no sound, no noise, only patience and a sensitivity fine enough to notice the smallest movements. Elsewhere, farther out and deeper still, the universe creates rhythms not from vibrating matter, but from the very structure of space itself. When two immense masses spiral around one another, when they draw close and finally merge, that violent motion does not only disturb their surroundings, it shakes the fabric on which everything rests. Ripples spread outward, carrying no light, no particles, only the slightest distortion of distance and time. These ripples travel through the universe like whispers stretched across billions of years. When they finally reach Earth, they cause everything to contract and expand by an unimaginably tiny amount, so small that if you closed your eyes, you would never know they had passed. But with instruments sensitive enough, humans can detect them, not with ears, but with long, patient laser arms measuring changes smaller than the width of a fundamental particle. There's something deeply meditative in this thought, that the most violent events in the universe, encounters between unimaginable masses, do not send us explosions, but gentle vibrations, as if the universe does not wish to disturb its own stillness. It allows its greatest movements to be told through the most delicate signs. And when we place these rhythms side by side, the breathing of stars, the trembling of space, a different picture slowly appears. The universe is not only woven from connections, it is sustained by rhythm. Not a single shared beat, but countless rhythms layered together, interwoven, without the need for perfect synchronization. A symphony without a conductor, without a complete score. Only movements that self-adjust, finding their place within the whole. In a very gentle way, this mirrors the human experience of falling asleep. When you are awake, the rhythm of thought is often hurried, overlapping. But as night arrives, as light softens, the inner rhythms begin to change. The heartbeat slows. Breathing deepens. Brain waves shift into longer, steadier cycles. No conscious decision makes this happen. It simply occurs as a natural response to quiet. Just as the universe does not need to listen to itself in order to vibrate, you do not need to try to sleep. You only need to be here, and rhythm will adjust on its own. Scattered thoughts, like random noises, gradually give way to a deeper, steadier background. A foundational oscillation that needs no content, no clear images. Perhaps that is why, knowing that the universe itself vibrates, brings a sense of comfort. Not because we can hear it, but because we know that even in what seems like absolute silence, there is movement. Movement that does not demand attention, does not require response. It simply belongs to the way things exist. As you lie here, in gentle darkness, you may hear nothing but quiet. Yet beneath that quiet, rhythm continues. Tiny oscillations within your body, vast vibrations far out in space. They do not communicate through clear messages, yet they belong to the same reality, one that knows how to regulate itself. The universe does not need noise to prove it is alive. It allows its most important movements to unfold at the subtlest level. And that is what makes them enduring. Not eroding, not exhausting, simply repeating slowly, enough for everything to continue. As you let your imagination drift with this thought, you do not need to picture equations or complex machines. You only need to sense that there is a background rhythm holding you, just as it holds the stars and the space between them. A rhythm that does not need to be heard in order to work. Sleep does not arrive as a sudden cut, but as a tuning. You do not disappear. You shift into another vibration, slower, deeper. And in that transition, you are not alone. The universe has been doing this for a very long time, rising, settling, then rising again in another way. And if you are still a little awake, you may notice that the quiet around you is not empty at all. It is like the pause between two musical phrases, where sound does not vanish, but rests briefly so the next movement has room to appear. This space, this moment, is such a pause. The universe is vibrating, but very softly. And so are you. You do not need to hear it. You do not need to understand it. Simply allow that underlying rhythm to carry you farther, slower, deeper, into a place where silence is not absence, but a gentle form of presence, enough for sleep to arrive naturally. Unending motion, and as that quiet vibration gradually merges into the calm background of awareness, as the pauses between oscillations grow wider, something else begins to reveal itself, not as a sound, but as a very gentle sensation of drifting. As if beneath the stillness, there is a current carrying everything along. Not fast, not urgent, but never stopping. The universe does not become still in order to vibrate. It vibrates because it is moving, and that motion has never rested. If you could see the full path of your own journey through space, not just within this room, not just on the surface of Earth, you would witness something very different from what the familiar imagination suggests. Earth does not trace neat circles through a motionless void. It is rushing onward, together with the sun, through ever-changing space. The sun itself does not stand still while planets revolve around it. It carries its entire system with it, crossing the galaxy like a boat drifting along a river of light. And so the paths of the planets are not closed loops, but gentle spirals stretching through four-dimensional space. Each orbit around the sun is also a step forward in a larger journey around the galactic center. And that center is not still either. It participates in even greater motions, pulled by distant structures, invisible masses, and ancient histories of collision that unfolded long ago. There is no point in the universe that truly stands still to serve as a reference. Everything is moving. We simply move together, and so we do not feel it. Like sitting quietly on a smooth night train, you may forget that you are traveling hundreds of kilometers per hour. There is no shaking, no noise, only the sense of relative stability. Yet beyond the window, the landscape continues to slide past. In the same way, right now, as you lie still with your eyes closed, your body is being carried through space at unimaginable speeds. Earth is rotating, the sun is drifting, the galaxy is turning, and our entire cluster of galaxies is moving within an even larger structure, influenced by forces we are only beginning to understand. There is no moment when the universe pauses to rest. It rests by moving steadily, without acceleration, without sudden stops. At larger distances, this motion becomes so slow that it feels almost meditative. Galaxies approach one another not like violent collisions, but like dances lasting billions of years. When two galaxies meet, their stars rarely collide directly. The distances are too vast. Instead, they glide past one another, stretching and bending each other through gravity. Arms of light are drawn out, streams of stars are pulled apart and then woven into new forms. From afar, these encounters resemble slow waves in a dense ocean. There is no impact sound, no moment of violence in the familiar sense. Only rearrangement, as if the universe is trying a different configuration, seeing how everything looks when placed anew. And throughout this process, light continues to shine, memory continues to travel. Time continues to flow according to the unique rhythms of each region. There is something deeply comforting in the way the universe moves. It is not hurried. It is not anxious. Even the greatest changes unfold slowly enough for everything to adapt. A galaxy is not destroyed in an instant. It is transformed gradually over millions of years, like a thought slowly changing direction in the mind. When we bring this image closer into human experience, a gentle parallel emerges. Life rarely changes through sudden collisions. Most change happens quietly, through small movements, slight deviations, decisions that seem insignificant. Only when we look back from a distance do we realize we have shifted onto a different path. The universe does not stop to wait for you to be ready. But it also does not push you to keep up. It carries everything together in a current wide enough that nothing is left behind. Even when a galaxy is pulled, distorted, reshaped, it remains part of the shared motion. It does not fall out. It simply changes form while continuing to drift. This matters especially now, as you allow awareness to move towards sleep. Because sleep is often misunderstood as a stopping point, as if everything pauses when you sleep. But nothing truly stops. Your body continues to work. Breathing goes on. The heart keeps beating. Inner processes continue to adjust, organize, and heal. You do not disappear from motion. You simply shift into another kind of motion, deeper, more automatic. Even when you do nothing, the universe continues its work. You do not need to guard the world while you sleep. You do not need to maintain the rhythm of everything. The great motions were set onto stable paths long ago. They will continue, with or without your attention. There is a natural release that comes with realizing this, that you are not the one keeping everything running. that you do not need to stay awake for the universe to move, that even as you surrender to the darkness of sleep, all journeys continue, smoothly, steadily. And if you can feel that motion not as something unsettling, but like a vast cradle gently rocking, you can rest more deeply. No need to anchor, no need to hold on. Just allow the current to carry you, as it has carried Earth, the Sun, and billions of galaxies since the very beginning. The universe has no state of absolute stillness to return to, but it has motion stable enough to feel safe. It is precisely this stability within movement that allows everything to endure, not because nothing changes, but because change unfolds within a spacious frame. And within that frame, you have your place, not as a fixed object needing to be held in place, but as part of the current being supported. You do not need to stay awake to watch the journey. You only need to let yourself drift with it. Even as your eyelids close, even as awareness slips backstage, the universe continues to move. And because of that, you can rest. Nothing is being missed. Nothing needs to be held. The current is still there, wide enough, slow enough, gentle enough to carry you through the night, just as it has carried everything else through billions of years without pause. The distant future. And when that unending current of motion has grown familiar, when awareness no longer tries to cling to a fixed point, the gaze naturally drifts even farther, not into another place, but into another time, no longer toward orbits unfolding, collisions forming, or vibrations spreading, but toward a vision so slow it is almost still. A future that does not arrive with sound, not with an explosion, but like a very long evening, when the light in the room gradually dims and no one is in a hurry to turn it back on. In that vision, stars do not vanish suddenly. They do not die in the way human language often assigns endings. They grow old. They slowly consume the energy that sustained them for billions of years. And when that fuel is exhausted, they change form, change rhythm, and gently step back from the central roles they once held. Some swell, releasing their outer layers, leaving behind a hot core that slowly cools in silence. Others end their journeys in heavier ways, leaving behind dense remnants that continue to exist as compressed memories of light that once burned. There is no urgency in these endings, no sense of loss in the emotional meaning of the word. Because in the universe, there is no external audience standing apart to grieve. Each phase is simply another state of the same matter, the same energy, continuing through the shapes that physical laws allow. Light does not disappear. It is released, it spreads, and it stretches until it can no longer be recognized as it once was. As time continues to extend, as new stars are born less frequently, the sky slowly changes, not overnight, not within a short era, but over spans so long that familiar measures lose their meaning. Galaxies that were once brilliant grow quieter. Regions once glowing with star formation gradually darken. Not because something has gone wrong, but because every process has nearly completed its natural cycle. The overall temperature of the universe keeps falling. Energy disperses. The difference between hot and cold becomes less pronounced. Motion still exists, but it slows, softens, interacts less. Everything moves toward a state in which there is little left to happen, not because anything is prevented, but because enough has already occurred. To human ears, such a future might sound empty. But in the context of the universe, it carries no sense of tragedy. No one is left behind. Nothing is taken away unfairly. It It is simply the natural outcome of energy, once released, seeking an even distribution. Not a failure of existence, but another form of balance. In that state, the universe does not die. It rests, but not temporarily. It rests in a deeper sense. A quiet achieved after all major motions have unfolded, after complex structures have had their time to form and dissolve. There is no remaining purpose to fulfill, no pressure to keep shining. What is striking is that within this entire vision, there is no single moment one can point to and say, "This is when everything ends." Everything fades, like a piece of music whose volume is lowered so slowly that you cannot say exactly when the final note disappears. It does not end with a sharp stop. It dissolves. When we bring this image closer into personal experience, a gentle parallel appears. Not every ending in life needs to be marked by drama. Not every closing requires a climax. Some phases simply settle. Heat fades. Rhythm slows. Things that once demanded attention become less insistent. The universe, in that distant future, shows no regret for its luminous past. It does not cling to the light that has passed. It does not try to recreate what has already been completed. It accepts its new state as a valid part of existence, not because there is no other choice, but because no other choice is needed. There is a deep calm in the way the universe faces its own future. It does not worry about what it will become. It does not ask about ultimate meaning. It simply continues in the way the laws allow until differences are smoothed away. And that calm can spread to us if we allow it. Because when we look far enough, long enough, short-term anxieties begin to lose their weight. The pressure to achieve, to arrive, to keep everything brightly lit, no longer feels compulsory. If even the universe allows itself to cool, perhaps human beings do not need to burn all the time. As you lie here in the night, with awareness slowing, you are practicing a very small version of this. You allow the activities of the day to close. You let the heat of thought fade. You do not disappear. You simply move into another state. One with fewer demands, less stimulation, less motion. Sleep is not a small death. It is a necessary cooling. A pause that allows the system to rebalance itself. And just as the distant future of the universe is not a catastrophe but a stability reached after a long process, sleep is not surrender. It is a way of continuing more sustainably. In that very distant future, there may be no one left to observe, no one left to tell the story. But that does not make the story meaningless. Meaning is not something stored forever. It is something that appears during the process. And that process, from the first light to the final quiet, has been complete. When we allow ourselves to feel this, not as a conclusion, but as an atmosphere, something within us softens. There is no need to rush. No need to fear slowing down. No need to resist the natural cycles of energy and rest. The universe does not promise to remain forever bright, but neither does it threaten with darkness. It simply moves through states, with a patience far beyond worry. And within that patience is a very gentle reminder that everything, including you, is allowed to grow tired, allowed to slow down, allowed to enter a quiet space without needing to explain. That distant future does not stand before you like a wall. It spreads out like a still lake where waves have settled. Not because something was blocked, but because there is no longer any wind. And as you drift into sleep, you are entering a small lake of your own. Not tragic, not resistant. Simply a gentle acceptance that in a universe this vast, rest is also a natural part of the journey. philosophy, and the final lullaby. And when the image of that distant future has settled in the mind like a perfectly still lake, when the idea of fading light no longer carries sadness or regret, one final movement takes place. Not outward, but inward. After passing through long cycles of birth and decay, heat and cold, motion and stillness, the story gently returns to a very small point. Not the center of the universe, but the place where you are lying now, at rest, in your own soft darkness. Because if everything out there can be seen as a vast current, then the life that listens to that current is part of it as well. You are not outside the story. You are not a passing spectator. Matter that once burned in distant stars, that was once compressed, broken apart, carried through cold space, has finally found a form capable of sensing, of thinking, of wondering. That form is you. There is no clear boundary where the universe ends and the human begins. The atoms that make up your body carry no personal memory, yet they carry cosmic history. They once lived inside stars. They took part in processes longer than any story humanity has ever told. And now, in this very quiet moment, they are temporarily arranged as a being breathing slowly, releasing tension, preparing to drift into sleep. There is something deeply gentle in realizing that you do not need to become anyone else in order to matter. Simply being able to feel, to listen, is already a rare expression of the universe. Not because you are special in a separate sense, but because you are one way in which this vast structure can reflect itself. Through your awareness, the universe is no longer only blind motion of matter and energy. It has a moment of knowing. When you think about the night sky, it is not only you looking outward, it is also the universe, through you, looking back at itself. Light travels from afar to reach your eyes. Signals become sensation. Sensation becomes thought. And in that chain of transformation, there is a beautiful closed circle. What was born from stars returns to recognize the stars. There is no great purpose that needs to be assigned to this circle. It does not need to lead to a moral conclusion or a mission to complete. It only needs to exist so that this moment can happen. The moment in which the universe, through a small living being, knows that it exists. And then comes the strange truth. You do not need to stay awake to hold that moment. Awareness does not need to strain to fulfill a role. Even when you sleep, even when thoughts dissolve, that truth does not disappear. The universe does not require you to remain conscious in order to continue knowing itself. The fact that you have known, have felt, have been present, even once, is enough. Sleep does not sever that connection. It only softens it. Awareness does not vanish. It steps back like a dimming light, allowing darkness to appear. And within that darkness, everything remains. Breath, heartbeat. Life continues its work, without direction from thought. Perhaps this is the deepest thing the long story has been whispering rather than declaring. That you do not need to try to belong to the universe. You already belong to it, not by belief, but by matter, not by ideas, but by physical truth. And because of that, you do not need to try to rest within it either. As you lie still, your body is supported by Earth. Earth is supported by its orbit. That orbit is held by gravity, and gravity itself is an expression of the shape of space. There is no point in this chain where you are falling. Everything is being held without effort. The universe does not ask you to understand it in order to be part of it, nor does it ask you to stay awake in order to continue existing. You can let yourself slip into sleep without losing anything important. No information is missed. No meaning slips away. As your final thoughts dissolve, What may remain is something very simple, a feeling of belonging, not belonging to a specific place, but to a process larger than yourself. A process that began long ago and will continue long after tonight's dreams have faded. And within that process, you are not an error. You are a natural expression, one way in which the universe temporarily arranges itself to feel, to wonder, to listen to a long story, and then slowly fall into silence. Now, there is nothing left to analyze, nothing more to understand. Concepts can fall away like the last leaves leaving a branch. You do not need to carry them into sleep. They have done their work, bringing you here into a softer, wider, less guarded state. If there is one final thing worth holding, it is not a complex idea, but a very gentle underlying feeling that you are safe within this larger picture, that nothing is working against you, that the current which brought you here will continue to carry you very softly, very slowly, through the long night. And so, you can let your eyes close completely. Let your breath find its deepest rhythm. Let awareness retreat, like a wave pulling back from the shore. No need for goodbyes. No need for a clear ending. Sleep is not leaving the universe. It is another way of being within it. Quieter, darker, but no less real. Sleep well. Rest like stardust settling after a very long journey. And in that quiet, though you no longer know this in thought, the universe still knows, through your very existence, that it has been seen, felt, dreamed once again.